Dark horse, literally and figuratively, enters the race for the White House. But could South Carolina Senator Tim Scott really have his eyes on the vice presidency? And why that should scare Democrats? All that and more now on Graph's Grievances. The most prominent black Republican in America officially announcing he will run for the GOP nomination. Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina making his announcement in his hometown of North Charleston before a 2-day campaign swing to Iowa and New Hampshire. The 57-year-old entering the race with an impressive war chest, having amassed $22 million in fundraising and millions more in a super PAC. Scott will certainly need these funds and many more to win over supporters from the front runners in the race, former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Scott plans to distinguish himself by leaning into his remarkable life story, evangelical faith, and relentless optimism. Born into extreme poverty, Scott was raised in a single-parent household where his mother worked 16 hours a day to support her family. It is from this background that Scott would rise to graduate from Charleston Southern University before entering politics in 1995 as a member of the Charleston City Council. By 2010, Scott would be elected to the U.S. Congress from a swing district, before being appointed just 2 years later to the United States Senate after the current office holder stepped down. The woman appointing Scott and making him the only black Republican senator? Then South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley. Haley, of course, is now running against Scott for the GOP presidential nomination. Having served in the Senate for over a decade, Scott has established himself as one of the most conservative members of the Republican caucus, and rarely breaking with former President Donald Trump. The former president certainly taking note, wishing Scott well after his entrance into the 2024 race, and taking a dig at Ron DeSantis, writing on his social media platform, quote, "Tim is a big step up from Ron DeSanctimonious, who is totally unacceptable. Good luck, Tim!" exclamation point. Trump clearly does not see Scott as a threat and might rightly view his entrance into the race as advantageous to him. Polling at around 3%, Scott is trailing Trump and DeSantis by huge margins. Plus, with Scott entering the GOP primary field, the anti-Trump Republican vote now has one more candidate to consider and split their vote. This likely solidifying Trump's front-runner status. So why is a relatively young, low-polling Trump stalwart entering a primary race against him? Well, Scott appears to have answered that question back in 1995, when then County Council member Scott said his goal was not to run for president, but to become vice president. "I thought about running for president," Scott said, "but as vice president, you get to speak more and have a forum to deliver messages." Whether Scott really still doesn't want to be president is doubtful, but knowing that he is unlikely to win the nomination, his entrance into the race appears calculated to help Trump win the nomination by splitting the anti-Trump vote and help him become Trump's vice president. We certainly know that if Trump wins the GOP nomination, he will not be selecting former Vice President Mike Pence to be his running mate again. Trump blames Pence for him not being in the White House today, after Pence refused to partake in Trump's illegal efforts to overturn the 2020 election. And Scott would be an ideal running mate for Trump, who needs to repeatedly reassure evangelical voters he is fighting for them despite his long history of sexual abuse, and convince suburban moderates he is not a racist despite a plethora of evidence to the contrary. Having a black, happy warrior by his side would be a major net positive for Trump, and should make Democrats very, very worried about a Trump-Scott ticket. Thanks for watching Graf's Grievances. Let me know what you think.